This is Barry O'Carroll from the Europe Direct Information Service based at Blanchardstown Library, and I'm back with another in our series of videos on education and employment options for young people. And we're very lucky to be joined today by Amy Collins, who works as a youth worker with the Brado Youth Service, and Amy's going to talk to us about volunteering and how that can be a gateway into an actual career. So Amy, thank you very much for agreeing to speak to me today.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm happy to be here.
And
it's different over Zoom these days.
It's very, and I'll just let people know, Amy didn't even know this was a video interview until a few minutes ago, so she's really good to be doing this. So I'm going to start off talking about your secondary school experience. And I know for a fact that secondary school system isn't necessarily for everyone. And can you tell me a little bit about your experience in that regard?
Well, I guess I actually had quite a positive experience of secondary school up until the junior cert. But I found it quite stressful, the whole idea of a lot of things just riding on being able to take in information and regurgitate it within a time frame just didn't really sit right with me, which makes sense because I then got very stressed about the idea of this leaving cert, which I know is such an issue for so many young people, the idea of, you know, your future being based around the fact that you need to take in information and output it in a space of time and do it better than other people. And it was not for me, just point blank. I was not able for it, couldn't do it. And to be honest, I was about 16 and I said to my mum, oh, I'm leaving school. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, oh, no, I am. And she said, Amy, I'm not leaving school. I said, no, I have to, Mum. And then I said to her, no, I really thought about it now and I need to. She said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, yeah. And I said, that's the part I didn't think about. What was I actually going to do? Although I knew that I was going to do something. And it was kind of after that then that I spoke a lot more to a guidance counsellor about I really had made a decision that this is what I was going to do, but it was about getting that informed information so I could make that informed decision to do so. And they did. They said to me, you know, there is other places where you can get education and training, and they opened me up to a community training centre where I could get a level 4 in catering, actually. Wow. So yeah, in catering. I had no interest in catering, but I knew that I would like to go on and study in college. It was always a thing. I would like to have an education, and I kind of knew from a young age I wanted to do something with people. I just couldn't quite navigate what that was. And when she said catering, it was catering or hair and beauty, and I kind of thought, oh God, not really for me. But if I can do this block of work and it'll take me on to the next thing, I'll do it. Okay. So I did that, and that was fantastic. And that actually opened up a gateway to be able to do a level 5 in something, which I did, and it was community and youth work, and that's when I think I kind of got a taster for, I kind of liked that sort of thing, and that's when my volunteering all came crashing in, and it just shaped everything.
And can we talk a little bit about that, because can you just maybe talk about how you got into volunteering? And I believe bowling plays a role in this somewhere?
Yeah, so I suppose it was kind of like when I left school, the gap between that and, you know, even being in that community training centre and doing there was a lot of gaps. It's not where I wanted to be, but my sister actually has multiple additional needs, and she played at the time bowling in the Special Olympics League for Slorgan Eagles. And I used to go every Tuesday just to support her. And then I was like, you know, there's something about the guy who runs that had said to me, oh, could you help out one of the days for something where we're missing somebody or something? And I said, yeah, I could do that. And, you know, it sounds, I don't know how you would really put it, but it was almost like, yeah, I'll do that so I can help. I'll do that, I can help, you know, that sort of thing. And actually when I did it, I finished up that one session and I was like, that felt fantastic. And not only that, but it wasn't like I was helping, it was like I had so much fun, and the young people that I was engaging with, they were teaching me different things in one session that I realized I suddenly had to communicate differently in order to be able to effectively, and I really was like, oh, that's, and I actually left, and I remember I was like, we went to McDonald's afterwards, and I was like, I learned something today, and I did it within an hour, and I learned something, and I just said, I'd like to do that again, and I just said to the guy, Dennis, can I do that again? And he said, yeah, of course you can do it again. And it just kind of started from there, like something so simple. He needed a favor. I thought I was helping and was going to be fantastic, and actually I walked away with something different.
That's just an amazing experience, and I love how you said that you learned from the people you were helping. I mean, that's great, and that's just such a brilliant attitude to have as well to this type of thing. I'm just so impressed with that. And can you just tell me about? I mean, you've touched on it already, but what effect did volunteering have on you?
Well, I suppose it was one of those things that, as they said, when I touched on it, I walked away feeling like I'd gained something, but it almost gave me a thing of, if I could get that within a 45 minute, an hour long session, and I knew obviously that something to do with people was what I wanted to do, I kind of started to explore more, and that's when other volunteering opportunities were presented to me. And actually, before we even talk about that, I think there's something about volunteering that it gives you the space to be able to take time to learn a lot about yourself, to grow and discover. And actually, anybody who's actually given volunteering a good go will tell you that it is that thing of, you think you're going to help people and you're like this great person, and you learn a lot more about yourself. You walk away learning a lot more, because it's no longer this thing of, this ego thing of I'm helping. Actually, I think on all my any experience I've had, I've walked away learning more than any of the people that I was supposed to be helping or working, you know.
And that's really interesting, because often I find at secondary level, when you're like kind of 17, 18, it's a very young age to be thinking about what you're going to do in life or what you like. Really hard. So volunteering seems to be a great way of getting a taste for something that you could, and if something, that's not for me maybe, and then you found something that kind of obviously sparked something in you when you were working with those people, and that's great to hear.
And you know, there's something to be said, I think, particularly within the current climate that we're in, because as I said, I didn't fit what was expected for secondary school. I was the type of person, let's say, that was due to finish secondary school, was due to do quite well, and actually it just didn't really suit me. And there's actually quite a lot of young people that are not suited for what we expect in formal education. And then there's something around, you know, when you finish education and you go off and you do your gap year, you go on your 6-year holiday, and there's this whole thing of that's a reward for everything that you've done. But I think that there's something to be said for people doing that anyway, and actually doing it in a way that's constructive and will allow them to then make decisions in a year's time. Because it always baffles me how we can expect 16, 17 and 18-year-olds to, you know, ask for permission to use the loo and then the next day decide what they're doing for the rest of their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's something about that age when you're that young and there's so much happening. There is the time and there's the scope. Take that time to get involved in volunteering and do something. You can see the world through volunteering, and I promise you, it's so much better than any week-long thing in Ibiza. You know, it's one of those things, and I think it's just by getting that information that you can do it out there. Okay,
and you mentioned there seeing the world, and I know that you ended up volunteering. This is great. You're linking the questions on perfectly. You ended up volunteering in Moldova, is that right? And like, how did that come about?
Oh, it's so strange, you know. I always laugh because people, when they do interviews, always ask me about this, and I'm sure people who have heard me speak always say, oh, she says the same thing. But it's one of those things that a youth worker had come to me, and it said, you know, there's this thing you can do if you're kind of into volunteering, you know, you can go abroad and volunteer. And I was like, no, you need need to have some sort of proper education, or you need to have money to go away and do all of this sort of thing. It wasn't something that had ever been, for me. I just was not going to be on my cards. And she said, no, Amy, you can do this. And I just kind of was like, oh. And then she said, well, have you ever heard of Moldova? And I always laughed because, no, I hadn't. I'd heard of it in the Eurovision, and that was it. And then she said to me, well, you can go there and you're kind of into working. I know you did a bit of bowling with intellectual disabilities. There's projects there where young people have disabilities, and you can go and, volunteer there and see a part of Eastern Europe. And I was like, so we had this conversation very informally. And after the conversation, I remember I came home to my mom and I was like, I'm going away. And she was like, where are you going? I said, oh, I'm going to Moldova. And she goes, where's that? I said, haven't a clue. Don't know, but I'm going to go. And I remember she was like, Amy, we don't have the money. I'm sorry, love. It's not, something that we can do. I says, no, Mom, they pay for this. And I didn't know that this opportunity was there. And it's a thing. Yeah. It's a big thing as well. Yeah. And yeah, it was a very last minute thing as well. So within a month or so, I was on a plane and I was going. And
just who did you do that through, that volunteering? That was
actually through a woman called Janice McGarry. She was working with Ballyfermot Youth Service and a project called Inspire 96, I believe. And she frequently sends young people abroad for these volunteering opportunities, and it's just amazing.
And how did you get on over there?
It was, do you know what I say? It was life-changing because, as I had said, I kind of knew I wanted to work with people, but when you take a suburban young woman, very privileged, white, everything else, it fluent in English, and when you plonked me down, not just in Moldova, but rural Moldova, and I was plonked down into this family, living with the family, and a 10-year-old was translating for me because they spoke no English. I actually thought, what have I done? I'm here for what have I done? And when she translated it and said, you can't use the electricity for this certain hours of the day and all these different things, it was kind of like, oh God. But it was the most life-changing experience because I was challenged in a way I'd never been before. I actually recognized my privilege that, suddenly I was the outsider, and it was not actually, I learned it was not an us and them situation. I had to learn to communicate better through everything from miming to song to dance, and actually it took me out of my comfort zone because not only was I working with young people with intellectual disabilities, but even in day-to-day life when over there, and it was the most fun time of my life. I had to realize that I had to make an effort with their language. I had to, do different things, and I gained so many skills, and it through this amazing thing of being in the sun and having time off to work, I learned so much about myself and grew that I actually was like, you know what, when I come back, I'm going to do something with this time. I'm not wasting it. I'm going to do something, and I'm going to go get a degree, and that's what I was doing.
And I mean, it just really identify with what you're saying. I mean, the first thing I want to say is, how brilliant does that look on a CV? I mean, that's just fantastic experience. But something that really struck me, you said, being in this foreign country and not us and them. I think, and I've mentioned this when I spoke about the English Language Assistance Scheme, which is another video in this series. I think everyone should experience being a foreigner once in their life.
Yes.
It really changes your perspective to know what it's like.
It does. It really does, and I think it actually, something like that can be quite uncomfortable and intimidating, but I think almost what I've found so far in life, which I say very, very young, at 20, going 25, is that the learning comes when you are uncomfortable. Not so uncomfortable that you can't do what it is you want to do, but you need to stretch slightly, and the learning comes when you're uncomfortable. And on the CV thing, I also will say that I guarantee you, employers in general, if they see, lived rural Moldova, volunteer volunteered in England, whatever, they will go for that before they say, so much getting that chemistry exam.
Yes. I mean, talk about something, talk about something that makes your CV stand out, and I couldn't agree with you more, absolutely.
Yeah.
That kind of, you learn more from that experience than any book, I think.
Yeah.
There's something as well you alluded to just a moment ago, and it's something you actually said when I listened to your interview with Ryan Tubridy before this, doing my research, and you used an expression, and you used this when I first saw you speak a few years ago at another event, and you said, well, this type of thing is not for people like me, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard this in other places before. What do you say to people who say this to themselves? That's not for me.
I think, and I'll be wholly honest, because I actually am really enjoying this sort of informal interview. Yeah. If you're thinking in your head, this is not for me, that's because you've probably been told, directly or inadvertently, that it's not for you. And you know what, it probably isn't for you because you're destined to do a lot more. And yes, you can do it, and you're going to actually probably do even more and even better. And sometimes we perpetuate these thoughts and ideas onto young people in particular, particularly, you know, young people, depending on where they're from, what their education is, the colour of their skin, their sexuality. Young people are constantly told what they can and can't do. I am a young woman from a middle class area who was always actually told what I could do. And then when I decided wasn't going to do that because actually it wasn't for me, that sort of thing, I then got the other end of the stick. Well, that's what you should be doing, that's what you have to be doing. But it's important to know that I had a really good support network, and sometimes you're not going to have that support network. But if you feel like it's not for you, I promise you that it is for you. And if it isn't for you, then it wasn't meant for you, because you're meant for greater things. And there's a lot of things that we can do that doesn't rely on the formal, doing the conveyor belts of leaving cert into job, into college. Like, there's pathways to everything, and we just need to get the word out that it's there.
Yeah, that's great, and that really sums up the aim of this whole series, because it's called Education Employment Options, and it's to show people that there are so many options out there, and they are available for you, and there are lots of supports, financial and other as well. So you mentioned earlier about coming back and going to college, and you ended up going to Maynooth University, which I was delighted to hear, because that's where I went many years ago now. And how did that come about, and what was your experience there?
When I finished the level 5 in the Liberties College of Further Education, I did a youth studies community course there, and I decided to apply for the level 8 degree in Maynooth. And the idea was sort of planted when in Liberties, but when in Moldova I had time to think, and that's when I applied for that, successfully got in, thank God, and I just fell back in love with education that I'd fallen out with.
And what did you study there?
Yeah.
What did you study in Maynooth?
I studied community work and youth work.
Okay, and you enjoyed your experience in Maynooth, obviously. Very different.
Yes, no, I wholeheartedly enjoyed it. Yeah, and you know what, it was the reason why I actually selected Maynooth at the time was because I had had such a bad experience in second level with this sort of examinations and, you know, having to meet a criteria that I wasn't able to do. And I was then, when I looked at the course in Maynooth, you know, most of it was continuous assessment. It was small group learning. The course was like 30 people, 35 people, and that gave me the space then to also, you know, learn how I learn. So I learned by asking questions. I don't know about anybody else, but the idea of having 200 people in a lecture and having to be the one to say, can you go back, please? I didn't understand that. No. So that course gave me the space to do this. And when I say the skills that I learned, they just continued to grow. And a lot of the skills that I learned when volunteering came into play. Then when we did a lot of group work, you know, all these sorts of things. When we went on placements, again, I was in uncomfortable settings, but I learned so much. If I could do that in Moldova, I could do this. And then I just continued to volunteer while studying.
Brilliant. And
every summer. Loved it.
And how did that lead then on to actual paid employment? So all your volunteering and studying. What happened next?
Well, I suppose when you look at it, a CV is just the piece of paper that the employer looks at and decides whether they want to talk to you or not. And any job interview that I've ever gone to has been like, yeah, tick, she's got some sort of education, that's fantastic. But then they're like, volunteering. Your hobbies was not just I like to go for walks or I like, trying new foods. Mine was I like to try new foods, and I did so when volunteering X, Y, and Z. And there's a lot to be said in employment in terms of volunteering, because it's not just, it's not like they look at past work history and you were paid to do that, and that's fantastic. But volunteering shows that you did it because, you wanted to do it. You have to want to do it.
And you took the initiative.
It shows that you give something. Yeah. It's brilliant. And as I said, any employment person will look, and the only will look at something different on a CV and love it. And I say that because in the place where I have employment now, I know a couple of years back they did a circus course thing. Okay. I wasn't there at the time, but a lot of the young people learned how to walk on stilts. Right. And years later, when going for jobs, that's the question that they were asked when they went to interview. You walk on stilts? Where did you learn that? And it gives you something better and more engaging to speak about than just I got 600 in the leaving. And if you can get 600 in the leaving, it is always the easiest option, because that's how the system is run. That's fantastic. But just to know that there's other ways we can do this, and you can still get to the same place.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, I imagine employers get in hundreds of CVs, and if you've got something on it that can just make you stand out, as in nobody else has volunteered in rural Moldova. I don't think anyone else has walks on stilts. You know what I mean? So they're the kind of things that just catch the eye. And can you tell me a little bit about the work you're doing now?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm employed with Brad Oak Youth Service. It's a youth service in the north inner city. I'm actually only there since November-ish, and it has been a whirlwind because, working online now after Christmas. But you know what, I absolutely love it. And to go from volunteering with young people to and engaging with young people to now be in a position where I pay bills, doing what I love and learn to do by not actually sitting that daunting exam that at one stage I thought to find the rest of my life, to now actually say I'm kind of living out my little dream, and I always say in work that when working with young people in the youth sector or working with any people within the community work sector, a lot of us, although we may go about our work quite differently, we are all quite the same in that we want people to realise and then reach their fullest potential, and that is what we aim to do. But there's something for me about dreaming and always dreaming, because for somebody their dream is to finish the Leaving Cert. Great. For some people the dream is to have a home. For some people the dream is to have a job, and there's other ways to do this. And I just think, don't stop dreaming, because at one stage I dropped out of school and now I'm being paid to do what I love, and I'm still continuing in education with a master's degree.
Yeah, it's just such an inspiring story. It really is. And so when I first heard you talk, and when we were planning this event, yours was one of the first names that popped up. Is that we have to speak to Amy, because people have to hear this story. So just to finish up, any advice you'd give generally for young people who are thinking of volunteering as a gateway to a career? I mean, you've already mentioned this, I suppose, but just any last kind of words to say on that?
Well, I think the biggest piece of advice, I suppose, there's two things I will say, is that don't not do it because you're afraid. If you make the decision to do something like this, there is always support mechanisms. So I've actually found from speaking to a lot of young people who wanted to volunteer, well, I can't go because I do counselling here, and I'd be afraid when I'm there I can't access that. You can't access that. Anything that you need, the supports are in place to do so. So don't be afraid just because don't not do it because you're afraid. And the second thing I will say is that if you've taken the time to listen to somebody like me who never thought that their story was anyway inspiring, just that it's just how the chain of events have happened for me, and you've listened to it, tell people, because it's information spreading that, because things like volunteering through the European Union, there's a big uptake in that in our European neighbouring countries. There's not such a huge uptake here, and it's something that the opportunities are there for everybody. And I think there's something that we need to do about getting the word out. And I just think if you tell somebody, find out somebody, look up volunteer, look it up in some way. If you're in a youth service, ask your youth worker about it. If you're in school, ask your teacher. If they don't know the answer, ask them, can you pinpoint me to who can? Find the information out and be confident enough when you don't know or they can't give you the answer to say, can you find it, please? Because the information is there. Spread it. Go explore the world while you're young. Learn lots, and there's always time for formal education when you get back.
Yeah, and listen, thank you for helping us to spread the word. Because that was the aim of this event. And it's all very well, there's great information on websites, but when you hear about somebody's actual experience, it really, really puts brings it home to you a bit more, gives a more human kind of experience there. So really, thanks for speaking to me today, Amy, and all the best with everything you've planned in the future.
You too.
Bye-bye.